And so I think, and so for a long time, I was just like, I don't know how I've just sort of like managed to paint myself into the corner of basically doing things I don't want to do, but I did. And so this book was a sort of a rebellious act of some kind. I mean, I was doing it with no real intention to publish it. I was just trying to do one thing in my life that I would enjoy.
Hey, thanks for listening. Last week, I wrapped up the Clarion West Write-a-thon for 2023, the fundraiser I participated in, I don't know, for the last 3 years to help raise money for the organization, to offer classes for underserved voices in the speculative fiction realm. But it was great. I wrote about a third to about 40% of my book, Ghost Wing. And I think the manuscript for the first draft will end up being somewhere between 150 to 160,000 words. I'm giving myself a comfortable margin of saying by the end of the year, but it would be great if I could get it done sooner than later, but we'll see. Client work has reared its head and ramped back up. So the timing was pretty good. It would have been great if it started this week, but you don't get to choose these things. The projects are very cool. When I can talk about them, I will. That's the end of the talking about the Write-a-thon fundraiser. So thank you. I appreciate your being patient for any time I brought it up. This week's guest is Zander Cannon. I've known Zander, since the late 90s. I guess he's about 10 years younger than me, but he was a young guy just getting into the business. And he's just a really, really sharp and present individual. And we haven't really had a long conversation of any sort that there wasn't a table in between the two of us in an aisle. So he has his magnum opus project, Kaijumax, which he is, I guess, 6 seasons of this comic series. So if you can find Kaijumax, go check it out. If you love it already, you're ahead of the game. And this is me and Zander Cannon. So you're sporting the Vertigo shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Love it.
It is funny because people, I mean, obviously, comic people still remember it, but it's fading from people's memories,
Sure.
It's, of course, I remember wearing it and some friend of my son's was like, is that the drug from the Flash TV show? I'm like, oh, maybe that sounds right.
Wow.
It sounds like something they would do.
How interesting that they would do that. Like that DC would allow the word vertigo to be used for that.
Right.
When it's one of their copyrights. That's an interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's it's such a thing where it's like, oh, everything takes place on Kirby Avenue or Infantino, Sports Center or whatever.
Yeah, right. No, totally.
So they're like, well, we got to put in because all the nerds writing the show. And,
sure.
And it's like, I'm one of the nerds writing the stuff, Yeah,
right.
You can't resist it.
Well, I mean, how different is it than the comics we made, when we're young? We're putting everyone we know's name into it. We're just like, oh yeah, this, that, and the other thing, and it's just it's part of the homage of our life. You right. Kind of give representation to all these little parts of your life in a comic book form or story form, depending on what sort of stories you make.
And so far, the only person that it's really bitten has been Todd McFarlane, when he named some gangster after a hockey player who then sued him.
Oh no!
I think his name was Tony Twist. I don't know I don't know the whole story, but this guy sued him.
That just sounds like a real bad move on that hockey player's manager. They're like, hey, that guy's rich. Let's try to get his money. Right.
Well, and it's I'm sure it was the one comic book that ever made any money, that did that. So they're like, well, we gotta
cash in.
I have to retire at the age of 38, so I got to do something for the money.
Right, I got to get teeth, so I'm gonna have to make that teeth fund now.
Yeah, those aren't free.
No, they're not. So I was actually thinking about you earlier today, and I was thinking about Vertigo, and I was wondering, like, did you have crossover in Vertigo? Because I was thinking, like, when you came into the business, Vertigo was still a thing, and you weren't fights and tights dude. So yeah.
Well, the first thing I did, the first thing, this is incredible, but the first thing I did for the DC Comics or anything was all the Wildstorm, America's Best Comic stuff. Plucked me out of obscurity, as it were. But ever after that, I was sort of like trying to get work where I could, and I knew more people at DC than I knew anywhere else. And so, yeah, like I ended up sort of like pitching a bunch of stuff, or being like attached as an artist for a pitch for a couple. There was what was it called? Infinity Kid.
God, Kid Infinity?
No, what's a Kid? Oh no.
Eternity. Kid Eternity.
Yeah, there was going to be a Kid Eternity reboot. I was the artist on that. That didn't go anywhere. That I was going to do a Swamp Thing. That didn't happen. Just there were a lot of things that kind of almost happened. Did some stuff for, and then I ended up doing layouts. Like I found my level at DC, which was to do layouts for books, Vertigo books, DCU books, whatever they had, because it's like my art style just was not a fit anywhere really, or we couldn't figure it out. And so I was just doing sort of like conventional adventure layouts for, whatever, Superboy, Justice League, Fables, Fairest, 50 other things.
Right.
Because they were like, oh, this artist is slow, or we're changing artists, so we want to have a consistency, or, this artist is new, and so they don't, their storytelling is not so great, or, and that was always, and actually it's like, it seems like, oh, that stuff is below the line, not interesting at all, but it was super fun. It was unbelievable practice.
Yeah. No, and it's so funny. Like when you're hearing you say that, I'm thinking of like, oh God, that would be like the dream. Listen, I'm way too old to be doing comics anymore, it feels like. But the idea of just sitting and doing the layouts, because the storytelling is really the jazz, for the drawing part. The rest of it's noodling. Like how much of a noodler are you after that point?
And I do like some noodling for sure. Yeah. But like, but it really was like, there was a lot to be said for like, you can't, I wasn't going to be there to draw my way out of a bad layout. And so I had to make sure that the layouts, were good from the start. Or, at the very least conventional, like, cause so many times writers are just kind of depending on you to like kind of knock out the usual, like big panel, wide panel, 3 little panels at the bottom, that kind of stuff. And it, because it works, it's, there's a rhythm to it and it works really well. And so then, I really enjoyed doing that kind of stuff. And it was funny too, because it's like, I wouldn't really get all the notes. So like, I wouldn't, I'd be like sketching in characters the wrong, costumes. Like there was a big thing called Pandora Trinity of Sin, where like the 7 deadly sins from Shazam were there, and I'm drawing them like the 40s ones, where they're like they look like the tragedy comedy masks almost, Yeah. And they're like, yeah, no, they've redesigned them since 1940. They're scary now. Okay.
Okay. All right, cool. I guess I won't do so much there. Yeah. That's so funny. I remember when Dave Johnson and I were roommates and studio mates, he was late on a particular project, and he came in one day with this like brainstorm of like, hey, why don't you do the layouts for the story and then I'll just do the finishes? And I was so insulted. I was like, how dare you, sir? And I'm like, and it's just because I wasn't busy enough for my own work that I think I was just like, that's, that's beneath me. But it shouldn't have been. And it would have been a blast to have done it. Because to see what Dave would do on top of, I think his pitch wasn't the smoothest pitch. And I'll just give it, I'll alleviate the pressure on myself. His pitch wasn't exactly like, I think he just needed someone to kind of like throw some grease on the axle, and then, and eventually it'll get rolling on its own. But
yeah. Well, and I know how eloquent I am when I'm like way behind on a deadline.
Yeah.
Not at all.
None. No, there's no eloquence left. Yeah, so two things stand out right away. One is the well, let's go the funny route, and then we'll go the sort of the deeper route. One is, what's the closest since you had like all those sort of near misses with proposal projects and whatever. What's the closest one that actually like got to the happening or even further, but then never came to fruition?
Well, Kid Eternity was really close. Actually, it was basically approved up the line, and then
Mm-hmm.
I think Paul Levitz, who was the top guy at the time, I think he sort of spiked it because I think that he had. The story I was told is that he had some like nostalgia for it, and we were changing the character too much. I mean, it was, and it's like because it was gender flipped, and it was sort of like that we were adding all this weird lore to it, and there was the character to Pet Weasel. I don't know.
Right.
There's a bunch of funny stuff about it. Mike Carey was the writer. It was great and it was fun, and I liked my designs, but like, yeah, it just, even sort of I don't know if it was Vertigo, but I mean, whoever sort of did the sort of the hipper version of it in the 90s, even that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuck a little bit closer to it. And it was just too different. And that's fine. I mean, a lot of times when I get into stuff like that, I'm not really thinking ahead about whether I have enough time to do things like that. I mean, I would have made time, but it's like when something doesn't happen, sometimes you're like, oh boy, that's a load off my mind.
Oh my gosh, it's like it is so weird. Like, it is such a great feeling when something goes away, because we typically have to kind of, when you run your own creative world, you have to overbook to
Right.
to cover your bets.
Right.
And sometimes you're totally smoked and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And that's when friends come into play. But, and then the other times you're just sitting around like staring at the wall. So, wow.
Right. And I mean, yeah, like that. That's hard. And that's why you always kind of have to have like a no deadline, your own creative project that you can just be like, well, guess I'm working on this.
Right.
For nothing, for no money.
Right. Right. Okay. So the deeper sort of discussion point that I thought of was, I don't know why Vertigo's not around, and I don't know why Epic isn't around. And I know why they're not around. The reason being is they both had champions, Archie, and
a bunch of other people who've long since left. Yeah.
Right. And so they had these champions who, raised the banner and carried it on, but eventually like that somebody's like on, looking at the spreadsheet and is like, hey, wait a minute. And they usually get nabbed by that point.
Well, and I think I think it was really too bad to sort of say like, okay, Vertigo's gone as an imprint. And it's like, it's there. You could just use it all the time. Like,
sure.
What? It's just another office. I mean, it's not even a different office.
No, I mean, like, it's like Black Label, like, which they're doing great work. Like, why not just have the Vertigo imprint that you could slap on a book if someone's like, hey, I've got this really cool idea for Animal Man. Okay, cool.
Well, and right when Wildstorm was being sort of brought into DC, I remember thinking like, oh, it would be really smart if they could kind of, because I mean, Wildstorm had a very sort of like, hip, sort of like powerful, image, at that time, where it's like, oh, this is the next iteration, like, oh, Batman, if take it to anher extreme, well, that's like Wildcats or whatever. And I remember thinking like that would be really smart if they kind of said DCU is more or less all ages. Wildstorm is getting a little bit, it's PG-13 plus, and then Vertigo's R, and then you could just have that's your separation.
Yeah.
And it's like, it seems really hacky to sort of separate it by age, but like, I don't know, it seems like that would be what would work, and that would be what would you'll be able to say, yeah, this one is fine for books and for the children's section of a bookstore. This is adults only, and I don't know. That always just seemed like the thing that they should do, but they thought differently. And now both Wildstorm and Vertigo are gone.
Yeah, right. It's, there's that, everyone's scrambling now to do their, middle grade graphic novel for, a big five, big four publisher. And that's great. But I just so hope there are enough people recognizing that they need to evolve that from the middle grade, into the YA and into the regular reader, categories. Because if we don't have that, the middle grade, graphic novel is going to burn out. Like because there's going to be too much content, and people are like, the next thing's going to be more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there will always be, it's just sort of overstretching its limits at this point, where it's just like, there's no way we need that many, especially now that they never go away,
Right.
Ones that 5 years ago are still great for every 8-year-old that, that enters the second grade or whatever.
And that's, right. I mean, and that's the thing about anything that's published. It is truly there forever. If there's a call for it, it's there forever. And, you have this very strong, like we who make stuff go, if we're not cognizant of the world around us, we go, I don't know why the thing I'm making isn't where I want it to be. And the reason being is we don't look at the picture clearly. The picture isn't controlled by the creators, the agents, the editors, the publishers. It's controlled by the shelf space. So Barnes & Noble shelf space or comic book shelf space is where the rubber hits the road for what can be put out there, because you can't put everything in a shelf, just not enough space.
Yeah. And I think about all the stuff that, that was made in the 90s and stuff like that was just, for lack of a better term, was just sort of like the pure outpouring of somebody's creativity in their mid-20s or whatever. And because the world was so small at the time, it's like, okay, yeah, that's kind of like one of the indie, like I did a book called The Replacement God, and it was pretty uneven, and and sort of more or less sort of all ages, and it was like, it's like one of the fantasy books that's coming out this month, and it kind of had a lot more prominence than it would now. Like now, people would be like, well, where's this going? Why are you doing it in such odd increments? And I mean, there's all these sort of things that you kind of have to settle into now to have any shot at being seen. Just a sort of an ongoing series that kind of doesn't know where it's going that's hard. That's hard to find a place.
It's super tough, and it's real tough when you read stuff and you look and you go, boy, like I'm not getting the thread here yet. Like nobody has laid down the story. And I really wonder, like, I remember, I'm sure you've done your fair share of portfolio reviews, and the inevitable of like, you're looking at their story and they go, it's a slow build. And I'm like, you don't have the luxury of a slow build, not in the terms of, if you've never done anything for anybody before, you don't have any luxury. If you are a name, you gotta have some latitude there.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think too, like when people come up with it, they have a new series, and it's like if the first issue ends on a cliffhanger, it's like, I know this seems arbitrary, but it's like, come on, you got to basically finish the first act. Even if you have an ongoing story, you kind of have to finish the first act to say, like, this is our character, this is what their life is like, this is the inciting incident that gets them to go and take a step towards, they can't take back or whatever, the usual sort of storycraft stuff. And then and I think that if it doesn't do that, it's like, I don't know, this isn't the 90s anymore. Like there's just too much competition, just the way you can't have a black and white book anymore, for better or for worse.
Yeah. No, you're right.
You can't be like, you can't be slow rolling this, your genre adventure,
No, and I don't, and I almost like, there's all this pressure of like, get to it when it comes, in the visual story medium and the literary story medium as well. But I don't even know if it's that so much. I think it's a matter of like how, like garnering, sort of credibility with the people who are engaging with what you make. And, like I said, the sooner you're in, the newer you are, the more you need to do this rather than just fulfill your dream and fantasy of doing the thing, which is tough. I mean, it's a tough thing that you have to be conscious of, like, this isn't just my time to shine. I need to really like produce something that is going to connect.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, like I'll look back at a comic that I got, 10 years ago, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I got one or two issues of that. It's just so gorgeous. And I'm like, oh, it felt like there's this epic story and da da da. And then you read the whole thing and you're like, oh no, they didn't know where they were going. Like they just,
Right.
they
Right.
just kind of petered out because they were doing some cool art, and that's fine. And you hate to make people do things that are kind of mercenary or sort of hacky, but like, boy, it wouldn't hurt everybody to just sort of say like, make a 6 issue series or a 150-page graphic novel that has a beginning, middle, and end that
Hmm.
almost could serve as a pitch for a movie,
Right.
and you'd be so much happier because it's like, yeah, you don't want it to be sort of this nakedly sort of like ambitious, like, oh yeah, I don't, this is just a stepping stone to a movie, but it's like, boy, you could sure benefit from having a 3 act structure,
Right.
and a and a conclusive end.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because I think we're, weaned on the nonstop monthlies or the television series that just goes on in perpetuity until somebody pulls a plug. So, I mean, the X-Men is still running, and the
Yeah,
X-Men has been running since the late 60s. Like it isn't stopped. It's just going. And there is no structure.
yeah,
It's just, here's a little chunk of something that we're going to squeeze into this ongoing,
yeah.
opera.
And I mean, I loved the X-Men, and it was
Mhm.
so good, but it was also like it was just terrible, like training for storytelling structure.
Right.
Terrible training.
Yeah.
Like never, you could never conclude a story, and even if you did, there would have to be like a little code at the end where it was like, but then this guy's alive, or
And the hand rises up from the pit. And you're like, oh, it's
yeah,
never over.
okay, and I mean
Yeah,
that's fun, and that's its own thing. That's great, but it's also
for
like
sure.
now when an ongoing comic book series is almost an impossibility to start a new one, like
Right.
without it being the X-Men or something like that.
Or yeah,
Uh,
or some sort of variation of, yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I can remember how sort of lambasted Frank Miller was when doing Ronin,
yeah,
because this wasn't comic books like Frank Miller comic books for so many people, and I just adored it. When it came out, I'm like, this is the most amazing thing. And I think it was because at that time I was really identifying, those sort of those single issues in a comic series, those just
mhm,
standalone one shot issues, as things I really preferred. And I
yeah,
think that's like that sort of drives the mind to saying, I want a standalone isolated thing, which was not common or available back in the day.
yeah. Well, and Ronin too was like, I mean, that was crazy bonkers and stuff, but it was also like a tight story.
Yeah.
All those threads got tied up at the end. Nobody, he wasn't doing anything that wasn't, I mean, and now, I mean, it's almost quaint now. I mean, they do weirder stuff in comics every day,
Right.
but like, but I mean, yeah, it was so tightly written. I think
Uh-huh.
that that was kind of an amazing thing that people are like, oh, this whatever pretentious or like indulgent uh, you know
Yeah.
art stuff is that's it's on the way out. It's like, okay,
I don't know.
I
Yeah.
know,
I wonder, you wonder, like, I mean, I understand the system, they need to make their money. Like the publisher needs to make their money. So they'll take a Ronin or a Dark Knight Returns or a Watchmen and break it up. Like, can we just make this 4 issues, 12 issues, whatever the thing is, which I'm sure if DC said to Moore, like, well, how many pages do you need to tell your story?
hmm
And he's like, oh, I need this amount of pages. And they go, okay, we'll publish that book, versus making it a 10 issue miniseries or a 12 issue. And, I think Ronin, if it just came out in a chunk, I think people would have been like, this is a book.
right. Well, and they certainly wouldn't have so much that they brought into it. Like if graphic novels are so rare then that they'd be like, oh yeah, well this is of a type with Contract with God and Mouse and a
And
bunch of
super
other things that,
boxers.
yeah. Yeah, it doesn't. It's not something where I'm like, oh, I just wish it was Daredevil
Mm-hmm.
necessarily.
Yeah. And that impulse is there because this is the guy who changed the industry for, in one fashion with Daredevil. And then he hops over and does this, and everyone wants more Daredevil. But, he had other things to do. So like for you, like, what was it like that was yours? Can you remember an early driver that made you want to tell your own stories?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest ones that made me go, oh, I think that this could happen is
Mhm.
Matt Fazell is a comic book artist. He's in the Detroit area. He did these mini comics called Cynical Man, and they were stick figure mini comics. He's an excellent artist, but he did stick figures, and and there was Cynical Man and Antisocial Man and Cute Girl and all these. I mean, it was like this sort of thing where it's like the first thing that you think of when you want to make a mini comic. It's just a bunch
Mhm.
of silly little things like that. And they had them at the comic book store where I was in the middle school or something. And I thought, well, I mean, obviously, I think I could do this. I think I could
I could draw a
figure out
stick figure.
how to do this. I mean, like even then, I could tell like, oh, it's not a limitation of his style. He's doing this on purpose. Because
Mm.
he also had other mini comics that were like drawn, more traditionally or whatever. And so I remember seeing that, and then at the same time, Ninja Turtles were coming out, and like the art on those was so chunky, and you could kind of see the thumbprints on it, so to speak.
Yep.
That I was like, okay, like this isn't like picking up Daredevil Love and War by Bill Sienkiewicz and being like, I don't even know how you'd start making this.
Right.
This is something where it's like, and so I remember being 12 or something and going, bugging my mom to take me to the art supply store and figuring out these pens and like kind of testing them out and going like, okay, I think I can do that, because I knew that I had to, if I wanted to photocopy it, I had to get something that wasn't just pencil, and sort of put all these things together. And I remember having to figure out like the pagination of like an 8-page mini comic, like where that some are upside down.
Algebra.
And,
That's
yeah,
algebra, man.
yeah, pages 3 and 4, and or whatever, and like and having to figure that out, like go to the store and go like, oh, 10-cent photocopies. Okay, I wonder if I can find a place where there's 5-cent photocopies.
Sure. Right.
And putting all this stuff together, I made a mini comic that was called the Ninja Garbage Man, which is
Nice.
the classic. And of course, it's like mid '80s, because so ninjas were the hot thing. And so yeah, I made a bunch of them and sold them to my friends for a quarter. And like, that was the thing where I was like, because nothing in there looked as good as the stuff in my sketchbook, right?
Mm.
Because I was doing stuff in my sketchbook with shading things and making it look nice. This is pen and paper, and it was, pretty iffy. And but that was one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, if you want to make something that can be printed, you have to you have to be good enough that you can take it down to 80% of your overall skill level, and then it's still acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty prescient for a middle schooler.
Well, yeah, it was a hard one lesson where I was like, God, this looks bad, but I think I could pull this out. Like,
It would be wonderful to, like, if you're in contact with any of those people who, bought your comic at that time, it would be great to share a drink with them and get their impression of this sort of tour de force effort by a fellow seventh grader. Because you would have to think, like, remember, anytime any kid did anything that was really impressive, it was like almost legendary. Like this kid, he jumped a skateboard over that, that thing over there. You're like, that's not possible.
right.
And
I was there, man.
like,
I saw it.
right. And then like you might be the part of legend of like, oh no, I grew up this kid and he like made comic books. You're like, what?
I mean, that's the magic and the horror of Facebook, is like I am still in contact with a lot of those people, and it's like, and they're like, and they'll bring it up every time I'm like, oh yeah, I did a panel at San Diego Comic Con. Oh, they're like, oh, this is kind of like when you did Ninja Garbage Man. I still have my copy. I'm waiting for it to be $1 million.
Like me too.
And yeah, I mean, and it is, it was. I mean, it is funny because a lot of people will bring it up like, oh yeah, I still have that mini comic sitting around. Um,
Amazing.
it's really fun. I mean, and I mean, I, the panel I gave at San Diego is about making mini comics. That's what I always hand out to kids who come to the studio. Is like, here's some mini comics that we made. Like, I don't know. There's something about how there's so many ways to make comics now, but that's still the lowest barrier to entry. Is like, these dumb little mini
And
comics. You just have to figure out how to draw them and photocopy them and cut them up. And
it's still kind of the coolest too. Like
yeah,
there's something.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would be. I mean, if it wasn't such a laborious process, it would be great for more creators to do more mini comics. Just because I think it would be a real cool. I don't know. It's just like this. Hey, here's my little like. I cut a single. This small little piece of whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've started to really try to bring my mini comics to conventions again, because it's like that's always the thing that people, especially when I don't have something new. That's the thing that no one has because they're never in stores or whatever.
Right.
I don't know, and it's always kind of fun to have them go like, oh yeah, this is a weird little thing. Like, I have a mini comic that I did 15 years ago that I found it again, and I reprinted a bunch of them, and it's called Master of Feng Shui, and it's like a kung fu revenge story where the guy reorganizes people's furniture and stuff, hangs up wind chimes, and
I guess you could use that to control environments, and you could be evil. You could do it evilly.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's obviously an evil feng shui master that he has to battle against, and
I love.
Anyway, it's the most research I've ever done for the fewest number of pages. Like, it's an 8-page mini comic, and I researched it forever, to make sure that it was right. And there's still mistakes, but it's, of course, they're respectful. It's respectful in any case.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. How did you for me? I don't really have a recollection of how cognizant I was of the specific tasks of comic book makers until I got the How to Draw Comics a Marvel Way back in the 70s. Yeah. And now, did you have that? And is that how you knew the artwork had to be in ink, or did you just have a special superpower at a young age to know production needed to have black and white?
I mean, well, I did see that, and I mean, I remember kind of being like, wait a second, he's using a brush with a ruler, all the stuff. I mean, I have basically all those pages memorized, but yeah, I'm sure that was part of it, and and certainly I knew there's some people use pens, some people use brushes, everything starts with pencil and all that stuff. But I mean, my mom's an artist as well. I mean, she doesn't do cartoons, but I think that she's a very practical person. She would be like, oh, you're going to have to draw this in pen. We're going to have to get you some good stuff, or whatever stuff that would work.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So that's where you get the encouragement is from mom in that respect.
Right. Yeah. She's a quilt maker. She makes art quilts that you'd hang on walls, and and they're peculiar, and they're she'll use all kinds of different things. She'll use wax paper, and she'll tie toys onto it, and that kind of
cool.
stuff. So I mean, no big surprise that all my interests are so weird as well.
Well, I mean, let's call the interests not weird, but interesting.
Right. Well, that's yeah.
So I mean, for me, it was a very sort of clear path. I was like, I'm going to go do comic books. I think it was at the age of 12, 10, 11 or 12. I was like, this is what I want to do. And I was very much focused on it. And then, went off to art school specifically to do comic books. There was no other, everything else seemed to be an inconvenience. Did you have that? Was that sort of an obsessive thing for you, or did you sort of sideline into it?
I wanted to do comics for sure. But I mean, I was always sort of like, oh, I could probably do comics and this other thing and this other thing. I think that's sort of the ADHD brain where you're like, well, yeah, it'll be a sideline, basically a full-time job that I'll do with 1/3 of my time or something. So I mean, and because when I was in college, I did a lot of theater because it was the same sort of thing where it was applied art instead of art for art's sake, which I never really enjoyed. I would take printmaking class or a painting class, and it's like, yeah, I like the techniques and stuff, but I much preferred designing costumes or designing sets and sort of
Yeah.
like painting all that stuff. And, you know, and like you have to design this costume for this character because it represents their, their personality in this way and their background in this way. And I like that sort of the, you know, how applicable it was to sort of like a larger project instead of just here's a beautiful picture or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And and I mean, I am not. I never. I always thought of myself as being an artist who was good enough. Like, and again, that's comics for you, where it's like you don't want to draw every panel the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, and you'll never finish. And
Right.
I like sort of saying like, yeah, it's good enough that it's going to be just what it needs to be,
Mm-hmm.
and and no more. And so yeah, I kind of I kind of did a couple things like that, theater and um, I was always on the newspaper staff and writing stuff for that, and I was always and I was an English major, so I was really kind of like in the literature space more than I was in the art space in
Okay.
college and stuff. So but comics was always a thing that I wanted to do, and I got a job as a comic book artist when I was still in college. Still in college, I was 20 years old, so uh,
Right.
I almost didn't have time to like think about what I wanted to do. I was just blasting people with submissions, and and it was 1993, so it was sort of an accepted sort of corporate risk to get like newcomers
Mm-hmm.
to do stuff. Like because Jim
It
Lee
was
was so
paying off.
young, and Rob Liefeld was so young, and all those guys
Mm-hmm.
were hotshot artists, and they were all young too.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that actually was probably the sweet spot area when they were looking at younger and younger people. Like, how can they find talent at a younger age? Because it was kind of a cool thing. Like Joe Madureira. Like Joe
Mm-hmm.
was 17, I think, like in 1990, you know?
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, he was like a kid. And but and then J. Scott Campbell I think he was pretty young when he started working for Wildstorm.
Here's a funny thing. J. Scott Campbell went to the next high school over from me. And so I think he was maybe a year or two ahead of me. And so we had an insert into our yearbook of like all the, like popular movies and musical acts of like 1990 caricatured by him. And I
Oh,
mean,
really?
and so he must have been 19 years old when he did that. And it was, I mean, spot on. Everybody looked, like, I mean, he was a menace. Like he was
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. I was thinking, oh wait, I'm going to hear an art war story, but this is
Oh no, yeah, no,
kinder.
I didn't have a chance.
I know. I hate it. It was those kids in school. Like there's always one person who was always better than you. You're like, oh man,
Oh, yeah,
just when that guy clears out, it's all me.
yeah, it's all me. Yeah, Uh, it's funny. If there were people who were doing comics, I mean, there were a lot of artists, who
Mm-hmm.
were like, looked like they were on the path to being like gallery artists. But that never appealed to me, and so I was kind of the comic book guy, and it was like no, nobody wanted to have anything to do with that. They're like, yeah, it's all yours.
You got that award. Enjoy it.
Yeah,
Well, and it's so funny when you said that earlier about like something that was applicable. Like if the art could be applicable to something, it was a much easier task to kind of, sort of take it on than this sort of like blank canvas of nothing. Just make a painting or whatever. Like I always felt like it was easier to solve those problems versus just make something up.
yeah, and I think not that art has to serve a purpose, but I liked it to. I mean, I always liked art to serve a story purpose, or I
Mhm.
mean, I think that everybody sort of went through a phase where they loved like MC Escher, or they loved stuff that like has a puzzle in it somehow, or like
Right.
it's like this. You look at this page and it tells you the secret location of a whatever it was. I mean,
Yeah,
there were
sure.
a couple of those books in the '80s, and yeah, I mean, I always kind of liked something secret, or that that had a purpose rather than just check out how nice this is.
Yeah. But so this is an okay. you write stuff, and you were an English major. Were you envisioning, writing as your career in some fashion?
I mean, no, I really did think about. I mean, it was comics. Like I
Okay.
wanted to do comics, and again, it's like I didn't really care much for the idea of being a prose author at all either, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, this is a slightly different thing. I was kind of like, what I liked about comics is that it was kind of below the radar in terms of its respectability.
I
You
totally
know,
get
that
that.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, because it's like, oh, what's the best thing that you can do as a gallery artist? Well, you make the greatest painting that anyone ever did, and maybe that sells for $1 million, or maybe it's in a museum, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're celebrated and the by the New York glitterati or whatever, and then
Right.
the best thing you could do as an author is like the greatest American novel that's ever been written, and it summarizes everybody's experiences. Well, and the best thing at the time that you can do with comics is just like make a decent whodunit that's kind of fun and a thrill ride. And I'm like, I like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's doable. All the other stuff is like, I don't even know how you'd start.
Right. Well, I've been grappling with this. So my whole career is, making comic books and being a designer and an art director is solving other people's problems. You're taking it's not you generating from nothing. You have to have frameworks and structure. And I've been writing prose for the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years. And it takes up most of my time that I'm not getting paid to do other things. And I'm thinking about that generation from nothing aspect, because it didn't exist for me for so long. And I'm trying to figure out where the connections to come from that. And I think back to being a kid with action figures and playing incessantly with action figures and coming up with narratives and stories, and playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, where you are, okay, it's your turn to write this part of the story in the terms of what you perform as the person sitting there holding the dice in your hand. And I think like that, I think that's where the source of that sort of iterative or that generative process, of free association sort of lives within me. Because you have to write your own stories, Zander, as you well know, to make your own comics. Where do you think that for you? Because it's not solving the problem for somebody else.
Well, yeah, you're right. And it is, I mean, I think it is hard, but I mean, I always like to start yeah, like a problem. Like, um, I want this to be a mystery, or I want this to be a coming of age story. Like, and so in a way, there are things that you have to do, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in terms of people's expectations. Well, if I say I'm doing a mystery, well, it's going to need to have certain things. It's going to need to have a twist, and it's going to need to have, all the clues sprinkled throughout. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea that, like, if somebody just said, write the great American novel, it's the worst thing that anyone could ever do. It's like, oh, what's it going to be like? Oh, it's supposed to
Right.
be good. It's like, well, I don't want
And
to do
make it
something that's good.
good.
I mean, but if they say write something that is terrifying, oh, okay, now we're talking.
Right.
Write something that is thrilling, okay. Write something that is funny, okay, great. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, good. What does that even mean? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Constraints.
But yeah,
So what, like,
I mean, I think, uh, I think that it's always. I mean, there's a lot of talk recently about like um, agency of characters and agency, like, and it's like I love the restricted agency of like characters, because it's like you don't want everybody to have all the choices that they can have.
right.
That's a great stories when you have two bad choices, and which one you make is the thing that explains your character. And
Yeah.
I feel the same way, where it's like I don't want a story where I can just tell anything I want to do. I want to be able to just, I mean, it's nice to be able to say like, oh, I want to, I did a kid story last time, I want to do a horror story this time. But like, it's nice to just say this is a horror story and it has horror story rules, and so we're going to pay off or invert all the things that you're expecting of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And I absolutely agree in the terms of having I guess, whatever the expected structure of whatever the thing is. And then you do have the opportunity to subvert it if, however you so care to. I'm writing a section right now, which I outlined in detail the other week. And it's really funny because as I'm writing it, I'm changing things, but I'm also I'm also not thinking like it's as interesting as it was when I outlined it, because I'm re-experiencing it already. Like I'm already like, oh, but all the things, all that, like you were saying, the choices, like I've peeled all the choices away. Like I take them away from all the characters, but I already know where it's going at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, but now I have the opportunity to kind of really kind of noodle and fiddle with things to make them go, be vexed even further.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it really is. It really is sort of like a hard thing well, I mean, when you're on that one on the fifth draft, it's just sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how this is gonna, I'm a little tired of my own story.
It's super tough. Like, and the hard, real hard part about it with, comic books, especially you, when you're writing and drawing your stuff, is that it's far harder to make the changes, because the changes aren't a matter of like, let me grab this section and move it over here, and then I'll just write a little bit of connector material for all this stuff to make it
not to
blend.
mention that the first issue's out.
Right.
That can't be redone.
Yeah, it's super tough. So, you were talking about like a mystery or whatever, but what was what in your head when you started like Kaijumax, where you're like, this is a, I mean, are you making are you making like a comp list of like it's Oz meets this, and then you're like, okay.
Yes, I mean, it's like, I felt like my writing style is a little downbeat. Like my characters are a little numb. My characters are a little bit sort of like low key, and so I sort of said to myself, well, I want to do something that starts at 100,
Mm-hmm.
and then my sort of like sad storytelling is going to drag it down to sort of like a palatable level, And so, but yeah, I mean, I mean, the first season is it's 100% like beat for beat like Oz,
Mm-hmm.
or and then another season is like Orange is the New Black. I mean, it's I I felt like I wanted it to be so familiar storytelling wise that like I could put in a whole bunch of kooky monsters and stuff, and people will go like, oh yeah, haha, that's funny. I know what to expect, but now you presented it to me in a weird way, so I get a kind of a chuckle out of it, or it's sad and disgusting, which is usually less. But yeah, again, it's like I feel like I think genre stuff is so powerful because of what people expect out of it, that I see no problem with sort of sticking to the tropes and sticking to the structures of that stuff.
Well, I think there's a value in the form that, that we as, creators, and we as, consumers of this stuff, we get a lot out of this stuff. When you like, because people like, if you love horror, you love horror.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no like, so you're in for the ride, and if the person is honoring all those strictures, they're going to be with you no matter how crazy you get.
Yeah. Well, and people, I mean, I think that when people talk about elevated horror or whatever, I mean, part of me finds that to be very annoying. When people sort of say like that, oh, this thing it transcends things because it's more popular. The way that Harry Potter was sort of, like everybody liked it who even didn't like fantasy, or
Right.
certain horror movies are elevated horror because you'd like them even if you don't like horror. And that's sometimes that's interesting. Yeah, if you don't like horror, here's something that might draw you in. But I also just think it's so insulting to think that people who do, a genre and have for years and years, like haven't been doing it right. They needed somebody to come in there and show them how it's done. That's obnoxious.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I think, I mean, look, good is good. If you do it good, it doesn't matter. I'm okay with it. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
But so, like, just going back to Kaijumax. I mean, when I mean, when you're kicking like these ideas around, like, you're gathering your notes of life that you see things and stuff. And then are you watching Orange is the New Black and then going, oh, it'd be really funny if like, that sort of mind goes like, oh, I love how they keep doing these prison shows, but they're different kind of things and different tones. And then, click, it happens.
Oh yeah, and I think about all the media that I've consumed just for research.
Right.
Like in a way, like I've watched hundreds of monster movies, and I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if I would have watched hundreds of monster movies if I didn't need to like mine them for like dorky ideas for my comic book. Like because not all of them are great, and a lot of them are not great because they're like super dated, or they're racist, or they're like weird in that way, and so. But yeah, I mean, I like it's interesting that my mind clicks into a. I mean, I don't know about you, but like my mind sort of clicks into a gear where it's like I'm watching this and I'm enjoying it, but I'm kind of enjoying it more because I'm looking for like the peculiar like aspects of it, or the data aspects of it, or like how
Mm-hmm.
things like this were in every 70s monster movie or whatever. Like all these sort of like strange little peculiarities. That's the stuff that I think is really great, and I mean it's fun to watch and enjoy that, but I have to watch it through that lens of
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm kind of mining it for ideas.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's like, I mean, you're almost your third person, you know,
Yeah,
narrator in your own sort of experience, because you have to kind of like, rather than, because it's so easy to kind of embed yourself into a story and get lost in a story, but you have to kind of go, no, I'm going to sit over here and I'm going to watch this and I'm going to take it in on an elemental level.
and I think yeah, like you always, and I feel like it's easy to get sort of sucked into like a story and not be able to see the forest for the trees, and I was really trying to resist that and sort of always sort of take the bird's eye view and say, okay, this has to sort of deliver on these thriller elements, on these kaiju elements, on these like crime story elements, so that I didn't ever like, so that it wasn't ever like a little, I don't know, so that it isn't something that people are like, oh, it's just his, his sort of self indulgent sort of
Mm-hmm. Right.
beloved project that nobody else can sort of get into.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, and I think because you are hunting for that connective tissue, that makes it something that the fans of either one of those two can go, oh, there's the thing that I love. And I
Yeah,
love like how he's woven it into this whole piece.
right. And yeah, and you hope that like, oh, a person who loves one but maybe not the other can still
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it, you know. And I
Yeah.
mean, hopefully, somebody who doesn't even really like either one of those, but maybe has read my other books, would be like, oh, I can still get this, and I know like, oh, this nonsense word is like a stand-in for this swear word. I don't need to know what that is. Like,
Right.
I don't need to know if
I
that's
enjoy I
referring to
enjoyed
like
them. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the made up swear words. They were fun.
yeah, yeah. You don't need to know that what it's a reference to. It's just there. It's just dumb stuff.
No. When did you know that it was going to be more than what you thought it would be at the beginning?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's probably been pretty recent, like during. I mean, I sort of did the last couple of seasons during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think that it's only been in the last couple of shows that I went to that people. I don't know. Part of this is aging, but like people refer to me differently. Like, oh, like I was on a panel, like, oh, we've got the new artist, and then we've got sort of these guys are delivering good stuff, and then we have our veteran masters.
Oh,
And I'm like, excuse me, excuse me, like those sound just like a way of saying an old cartoonist, which I'm getting there. But like, but it was interesting because it was like, oh, that was not a shift that I'd made in my own head.
mm,
But I like, obviously that's nice. But like, but it's funny to sort of say, uh, I don't know. I mean, again, it's like it was nice when it got to the point where like the consensus was this is a good comic, and
mm.
that if you're into these things, you should read it. If you're not, don't, because it's grim. But like, but it was nice in the last couple of years to sort of have it go like, oh yeah, like this is this has cemented a certain type of type of career around me. You know
Mm,
what I mean? As
yeah.
opposed to just, I mean, we're always just kind of flailing, making comics and hoping that they're any good. But it's nice to sort of have one that stuck a little bit, you know?
Yeah. 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 It is grim. And and the really interesting, you know, counterpoint to that is the way you draw, which isn't grim. So it's, it's so kind of, you know, I don't know, like when I look at your books, I'm like, oh, okay. But then like, when you were talking earlier, like how like kind of downbeat, your books typically are, I'm like, oh, okay. Like it's so interesting how, but everything's very bright visually. You are very like sort of positive visually, but like but everything's written in a minor key.
Well, and I think that those things fed each other, because originally I
Uh-huh.
was going to write it for another artist who Brian Brown, who does he did 8 Billion Genies most recently, and God Hates Astronauts and Curse Words,
Mm-hmm.
and his stuff is over the top and wild, but it's also much more sort of the proportions of people are correct and all that, all that extra academic nonsense. But his style is very vivid, and there's not sort of that lens of cartooniness that I think is kind of sweetens everything up, makes you
Mm-hmm.
maybe not really like be totally grossed out by like a landscape full of guts or whatever. And
Right.
so I if he had ended up drawing the comic, I probably would have dialed back a lot of the horror, or a lot of the horrors of it. Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But with my art style, I could see what was hitting the page, and I'm like, this isn't. I mean, god awful stuff happens the whole time through, and it's like, yeah, I mean, you're aware of it, but in a way, it's a little bit like reading prose, where you're there's a distance. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and you can kind of accept it a little bit better. I don't think that people would have tolerated it if it were more realistic.
Well,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I guess you are kind of offering some space, to the horrors that happen, between these characters.
yeah. And then, yeah, somebody's arm gets cut, and I mean, the nature of the thing, where I could say like, oh, somebody tears their arm off, and it's like it's just going to grow back, you know,
Right.
like all these dumb little monster tropes, and so yeah, I mean, and of course, I don't want to like traumatize people or be, you know, or kind of snicker up in my sleeve at like how horrified people are, but I want them to be horrified in a humorous way, where they're like, oh my
Yeah.
god, I can't believe that happened. Oh, that's you know that's
Yeah.
grotesque without being traumatic, I guess.
Right. So when you put it all together initially, what was your sense of scope? And like obviously you said that you sort of kind of re-envisioned the scope, I guess, through the pandemic because you had the space. Um, did you start and say, I have this arc and I wanted to get to here? Or did you have sort of a here to here point and then you're like, I can go on if I needed to go on from here to here?
I well, Oni at the time was really sort of, you know again, it's like when Ryan went to do other things, and I was sort of like, well, that's that, and they were like, well, do you want to draw it? And first of all, I was like, no,
Hmm.
that sounds like a lot of work, but but then they convinced me, and I ended up lettering it and coloring it, and I mean, I can't sort of like help myself, and
Right.
but they were very supportive from the start, and so they were like, well, how many, I said, well, let's do a 6-issue season, and they're like, how many seasons do you think they're going to be? I'm like, I don't know, and they're like, well, choose something. And I'm like, so we kind of settled on 6, because like
Yeah.
that can be divided by 2, it can be divided by 3, and so then you have, as it turned out, it's like, okay, there's 6 soft covers, and then 3
Hmm.
hard covers, which are two, collect 2 of those books each, and that worked out really well. And at the time, I had sort of said, oh, okay, the first season's going to be like the introduction to all the basic stuff in this prison. Second season, I think that somebody will escape. We'll see what life is like on the outside. And then I kind of didn't know, but I mean, I knew all these things about this character's story is going to go this way. This character's story is going to go this way. You know, oh, the third season, oh, hey, maybe I'll just talk more about the gangs, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then the fourth season, okay, let's do a women's prison, that's the next island over or whatever. And the fifth, and we can do like the legal system, so it just, things were starting to occur to me. I mean, again, it's like I had all these threads mapped out, or at least
Right.
sort of conceived of. And then I had to sort of like think like a writer and say, this book is about this. It's not just the latest 5 issues, 6 issues. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's got to be about something. So we've got to start a bunch of stories in each one, and then and conclude, almost all of them. I only wanted a couple threads to continue from book to book.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's very much, Wire-esque in the terms of like how do you move the point of view through this same world.
Yeah, and yeah, and I think and again, it's like, I think that the book comes across as being very personal, and it comes across as being very sort of like, and it is, but I also just think like I really was, so much of it was very planned and very like sort of coldly calculated from a from a story. Like, people are like, well, how'd you come up with this character? He's so sad. And I'm like, I just wanted a counterpoint to that character,
Right.
and oh, they're just chess pieces until I start writing their dialogue. And then of course,
It kind of
they're, they're my dear children that I murder an issue later or whatever. But
right. Yeah. Well, it's yeah, and it was actually a kind of a treat to get to go through what you sent me, because some of them, because you had all the iterations there, I was able to see sort of the developmental level of the pages. So
mm,
as you did the layered artwork, and like I could see just the line work over the fully colored backgrounds, and I could see flattened pages. It was kind of cool. It was a
yeah.
nice little touch. Um, so how do you structure your work? Like you have a studio. Do you share a studio?
I
Is it
do.
a
I share a studio. It was just me and Kevin Cannon for a while, who's not related to
Mhm.
me. He's a cartoonist here, and but now it's like, I mean, it's essentially my studio. My name's on the lease anyway, and then I
Okay.
share, and then everybody kind of like has a section, has their own little 8x8 section or whatever, and then we can share whatever,
Right.
a large format printer and a large format scanner and Wi-Fi and water and a fridge and all that stuff. And yeah, and that's, I love that, and I've always worked outside the home because it, I mean, it's less about what's there, but about what's not at home. Like
Right.
there's no stuff sitting on your drawing table like staring at you, and there's no uh, I mean, hopefully that you can kind of let go of the day's work and gather strength for the next one.
Yeah.
And it's pain, when somebody's like, "Oh, we need this file uploaded at 8 o'clock at night," and you're like, "Ugh." I gotta go
Yeah.
drive, whatever, down to the studio.
I guess
It's no big deal.
the nice thing about the if you do have a sort of a cloud, on top of your hard files, it does make it easier. I found that like on projects, I can just pull my phone out, go find it in Dropbox,
Yeah,
and send them the thing. I'm like, okay, good. I don't have to move. I'm
yeah.
covered.
I'm almost there. I'm almost there, but it's like,
Okay.
sometimes it's so hard. Well, sometimes when I finished Kaijumax, I got all kinds of stuff that I was like waiting on. I was like, I got a new graphics card, I got a new Cintiq, I got a new this, I got a new chair, I got like all this stuff that I didn't want to change because I was like, I don't want to mess
Mhm.
things up. I don't want to.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't want to rock the boat.
I don't want to rock the
So
boat. I don't even want to like change the pen, the pen tool.
no, you got to keep it all. Got to keep with the working with how it works, because it's well, it's funny because as an artist, you said it earlier about going to the art store, and finding that pen, like you know you love going to the art store. The art store is this excitement point of like opportunity, like, oh, this inspiration will hit you from an inanimate object. Um, but we do get entrenched in the tools that we use. Do you try to like stick with those tools, or where do you give yourself the space to evolve something into your process?
I like to change tools with every project.
Cool.
I mean, every sort of like creator owned, I write and draw project.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like if somebody, I'm going to do a Rick and Morty thing, and and so, but I'm basically going to draw it the same way I drew Kaijumax, because it's like, well, that's basically the style anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But like, but yeah, I did it. When right before Kaijumax, I did a book called Heck, and the way and it's a very downbeat. It's about hell, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I did it. I did it with a brush pen on like typing paper at print size. And that
Wow.
has this, it has sort of like a remarkable effect, because it's like, well, you can't do detail. You can't, somebody's looking into the distance. You really kind of can't, you have to do the minimum to sort of identify things. And so
Mm-hmm.
it changes how you make things. You're like, okay, this story about hell is going to be pretty like light on the details. Like everything's just going to be sort of this oppressive darkness around these characters, because there's no room for anything else. And
Yeah.
then Kaijumax, being full color, and me kind of learning how to do color. Well, then it's like, okay, now we have something that's so bright and so colorful, and I'm really going to play with that. I've done all these other I had a project planned that was going to just use watercolor and colored pencil, so that everything was going to be a little bit light, and you would it would sort of like have a really stylized approach. And then another one that's black and white and red, where it's and heavily cross hatched and things like that. I really like how it's almost like a cheap way of getting new ideas is
Yeah.
just changing tools and having them go like, oh, I can't do that I would have done with the in full color. I'll have to do this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's very much in line with what you were saying earlier about, just writing a story. If you are writing a mystery, these are the constraints. If you're
Yeah.
writing a whatever, these are the constraints. And when you are working with specific tools, they have constraints, and you have to work within them, because otherwise, if you're using a tool that doesn't allow you to find detail, well, then how big does it have to be to get fine detail? Well, then that's not realistic. So solve the problem.
Yeah. And I think, and I think also, if I'm drawing something for someone else, I don't want to restrict myself so much, because they may be asking for something that then then I'm screwed if I can't do it.
Right.
But if I'm writing it, then I can have that sort of feedback loop of like, here's the art. Oh, that's going to change what I'm writing, and then that what I'm writing then changes what I'm going to draw. And I really like, as much as I like planning out my stories, I like having it be, there would be a sense of improvisation on the page, if I if it's possible.
Yeah, no, I
keeps you
totally dig that.
interested.
No, I totally dig that. And and I think that was that was the whole idea of getting new tools, breaking when you plateau. Because we all plateau in whatever we're doing. And one of the best ways to break that plateau is to find something that you can, force your brain to go, how do I solve this problem with this new input?
And not just in quality, but in speed too. Like, when I did this book, Heck, with the brush pen and the small size, it's like I was trying to break myself out of like a fussiness that had started to creep in, where I would crosshatch things so in such intricate detail that everything was taking an age to do. And so
Right.
I wanted something where I could work fast enough that there could be a flow to it, and almost, I wouldn't say like a manga like flow, but a flow that was sort of like, you could really time things out. You would know how long it would take for somebody to read a panel or a page, and you could make the sort of the plot beats come at sort of like a predictable interval.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working, because you've been doing it for
Okay,
long. It's true. Like you don't get to do what you've done for as long as you've done on your own, of your own things, and do it for publishers for other things if you're not doing it, at a high level. Like, it just doesn't work. People don't do that, or can't.
I think that for a long time I was like, this isn't working. All
Yeah.
of this, it's not working, you know. But I don't know how to do anything else, so I guess I've got to tough it out. You know, there was before Heck came out. I mean, I was doing storyboards for like PSAs about how to
Hmm.
keep work sites free of beryllium, or like stuff that was not exactly in it
Yeah.
wasn't one of my interests, let's say.
No, no,
Um,
no. Yeah.
and so I think, and so for a long time I was just like, I don't know how I've just sort of like managed to paint myself into the corner of basically doing things I don't want to do, but I
Hmm.
did. And so this book was a sort of a rebellious act of some kind. I mean, I was doing it with no real intention to publish it. I was just trying to do something one thing in my life that I would enjoy,
Hmm.
and 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 that worked out. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Well,
worked great.
you
It was
could,
nominated for an Eisner. Like,
right. You bet on yourself. And like, I think it's a hard line to run if like everyone wants to bet on themselves, but you have to look honestly at what you're capable of doing and what you've done. And when you make that bet, because the bet, you can end up with nothing. So the goal is to say, I know that I can do all these things. I have proven time and time again. I'm not just making this up in my head to go, I just want to do something. Like you
yeah,
can do it with a little bit of, awareness.
yeah. Well, and one of the big ones was that I realized that I'd had ADHD. You know, and one of the things, I mean, show of hands at comic conventions, it would be like
Yeah,
everybody. That
almost. Yeah.
And I think that what my parents never thought I did, because like they'd give me a little Matchbox car, and I'd play with it for 2 hours, and it's like, yeah, because that was interesting. But like
Right.
math homework, on the other hand, was not super great for me.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like,
Cause you had to yell at me to do that. Right.
yeah, yeah, right. I'll do it when it's urgent. I mean,
Yep.
there's all those
Sure.
rules about like what when people with ADHD will do stuff. But anyway, like, and starting to realize, okay, well, that comes with weaknesses, obviously, and strengths as well, because it's like I don't ever want to do something that I don't enjoy. And so when I ended up doing a book that was like, it took no sort of, it was not, I was not putting like tons and tons of craft into every page, but I was
Hmm.
always following a story where it interested me. And
Yeah.
the payoff was that it's a pretty interesting story, and it flows in a way that keeps people engaged, even though I was winging it. Like I was totally winging the story, but I was always all just following my own uh, sort of idiosyncrasies and sort of interests at the time. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, there was a time to sort of like accept my weaknesses, and see if there's any silver lining to that, or a flip side.
Oh, I think that's just a huge lesson for anybody to learn and hear somebody say it, because I think if we can all, look at ourselves and gain that insight, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it still is a problem.
Of
when
course,
when you're
every day.
juggling 50 things, it's like a lot of these things are not going to get done, or I'm
No.
going to have to get yelled at before they get done.
Yeah. No, every single day. I mean, I write about it incessantly in my newsletter all the time. Like it is my constant battle every day to beat the my own antagonist, which is me. Like I have to, how do I beat me? Every single day. And
Right,
that's my job.
right. In single combat, it's
Yes,
just got to roll up the sleeves and start punching.
exactly. Get right in there. All right. So you are on Twitter and Instagram?
I'm on, yes, Twitter, or whatever it's called now. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, Zander_Cannon, and then I'm also on Instagram, Zander Cannon, and then I migrated my Instagram over to Threads, just at Zander Cannon.
anything you want to just to pimp right now?
Um, I'm between major projects, but I just had a project come out, or I just had a short story come out in Xeno, which is Oni's anthology of science fiction stories. I
Right.
just had a
Right.
short story come out in 2000 AD. They're color edition. That's sort of all ages. I have a short story with Gene Ha that's coming out in a Ahoy Comics anthology about cryptids.
Awesome.
And so and then I'm just about to start working on a Rick and Morty one shot.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, Gene's the best. He's such a great guy and unbelievably talented.
Yeah, and he, I had talked about the layouts. He's the one who sort of eased me into it because I was doing layouts for Top 10, and then we did layouts for a lot of stuff. And he's always kind of like, I mean, Gene has been my Sherpa for many many sort of like projects into the mainstream comic book world, where I'm always kind of like, I don't know if I want to go in there. He's like, come on, let's do it.
He's a good enabler for all the right intentions. Yeah,
I love it. He's a wonderful man.
The Xeno thing, that was the one that just came out. I think was Nick Cagnetti in that book with you.
Yep, he's sure. Yeah. Fantastic.
Awesome.
I mean, I mean that. I got to say, that anthology is murderer's row of like excellent cartoons. It's really, really great. So, and that was with and the editor of that is Zach Soto, who he was the editor on the last couple of years of Kaijumax.
Okay,
so that was old home week for me.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, Zander, it's great to talk to you. We
same.
Yeah, it's weird. We go back a long way, but we've never had the time to really chat. Maybe we'll have to do this again on a very specific thing later on. But thanks for taking the time.
All right. Have a good one.